There was a time when the pantry was a living pharmacy, not a dark closet for dead, factory-sealed food. Our ancestors used a single, powerful master key to turn any garden vegetable into potent, living medicine. Today I am going to show you that technique step by step so you can reclaim the lost art of making your own. The living pantry. Today, our kitchens are sterile, silent places. They are filled with food that is pasteurized, preserved, and packaged for a shelf life that can outlast us. But it is fundamentally dead. We've traded living medicine for modern convenience. But our ancestors knew a powerful secret. They didn't have our technology, but they had wisdom. They knew how to harness the invisible life all around them, turning simple garden vegetables into something that actively healed the body. You've surely heard the names whispered from the past: sauerkraut, kimchi, even miso and kefir. These aren't just trendy health foods you buy in a plastic tub. They are the last echoes of a vast, forgotten tradition. They are the survivors of a time when every home kept a living pantry, a pantry that worked with nature, not against it, to keep the family strong and full of life. But somewhere between the hum of the refrigerator and the endless aisles of the supermarket, we lost the knowledge. We forgot how to make our own medicine from our own kitchens. We've become disconnected from this simple, powerful, and ancient craft. But that secret isn't gone completely. It's just waiting to be rediscovered. And it all starts with a single, simple master key. The master key, before there were complex recipe apps, intimidating cookbooks, and endless online blogs that overcomplicated everything, our ancestors had something better. They possessed a master key. It wasn't a rigid scientific formula written in a book. It was a single, simple technique, a piece of practical wisdom that could unlock the living power hidden in almost any vegetable. This wasn't specialized knowledge reserved for experts or chefs. It was a fundamental skill, something every household knew and practiced. This one idea was the foundation of health in the home. It was the knowledge that turned a humble cabbage, a handful of green beans, or a basket of root vegetables into living medicine that could last the winter. The beauty of the master key was its simplicity and its power. It didn't require fancy equipment or strange ingredients. It just required what you had: fresh vegetables, pure salt, clean water, and a little bit of patience. We've lost this foundational wisdom, trading it for aisles of complicated jars and bottles. We've been convinced that this process is difficult or dangerous, or something best left to factories. But this one piece of knowledge, this single master key, was passed down for generations, not in books, but by hand and by heart. It was a secret that stretched back thousands of years, all the way to the very dawn of civilization. The 10,000-year-old secret, long before the first refrigerator hummed to life. Nearly 10,000 years ago, our ancestors stumbled upon a kind of magic. In a world without freezers, canning plants, or vacuum seals, they found a way to not only save their food, but to make it fundamentally better. This was the Neolithic period, a time when humans, new to farming, faced a heartbreaking problem: how to keep the abundance of the harvest from rotting before the lean winter months. The solution they discovered was revolutionary. It required no electricity, no complex machinery, just a simple, natural process. This discovery changed everything. It allowed their food to last, safe and secure, for months on end. But something even more incredible happened in those humble jars and clay pots. The food didn't just survive, it transformed. It became more vibrant, more complex, and packed with new life. Today, modern science, with all its complex equipment, is finally beginning to understand why this ancient method works so perfectly. It's proving what our great-great-grandmothers knew in their bones, that this process was pure, practical genius. They didn't know the scientific names for what was happening, but they knew how to work with the billions of invisible gardeners that made it all possible. The invisible gardeners. On every fresh vegetable picked from the earth, in the soil, and even in the air, live billions of invisible helpers. Our ancestors didn't know their scientific names, and they certainly didn't have microscopes, but they knew, instinctively, how to work with them. While we've been taught to fear all bacteria, to scrub and sterilize our world, they understood that some of these tiny organisms were essential allies. They were the invisible gardeners that did the real work. The process they harnessed is what we now call lactic acid fermentation. It has nothing to do with dairy. It's a beautiful natural collaboration. These good bacteria, which live right on the skins of healthy vegetables, are given a safe, salty home inside the jar. In return for this sanctuary, they begin to feast on the natural sugars present in the vegetables. As these tiny gardeners eat, they release a remarkable gift into the brine. That gift is lactic acid. This isn't a harsh artificial chemical added from a bottle, it's a completely natural byproduct of life. This simple tangy acid is the key to the entire transformation. It's the secret ingredient that turns a simple jar of produce into a source of vibrant health. And it all happens because our ancestors knew how to partner with the life we've tried so hard to wash away. The acidic shield, that gift from those tiny gardeners, the lactic acid, wasn't just for flavor. It was a natural acidic shield. As it slowly filled the brine, it completely changed the environment inside the jar, turning the simple salt water into a powerful preservative. This wasn't a harsh, artificial chemical designed to kill all life. It was something far more clever. This gentle acid created an environment where bad bacteria, the ones that cause rot, mold, and sickness, simply couldn't survive, the kind that can make you violently ill. This wasn't just about preservation. It was a matter of survival. Get this one step right, you create medicine. Get it wrong, you create poison. And that acidic shield was the only thing standing between the two. This acidic shield was nature's own perfect safety system. It protected the food from spoiling, making it safe to eat for months. But it did something else, something our modern, sterile preservatives could never do. While it eliminated the harmful microbes, it created the perfect sanctuary for the good bacteria to flourish and multiply by the billions. Today we rely on dead additives and industrial processing to keep our food safe, creating a sterile, lifeless product. This ancient method was the exact opposite. It wasn't about creating a dead environment, it was about cultivating a living one. This acidic shield was the key. It didn't just preserve the harvest, it transformed it into something packed with life, a food that actively supported the people who ate it. They didn't just eat these foods, they ate them to feel truly alive. Eating alive people didn't just eat these fermented foods to survive the winter. They ate them to feel alive. Each spoonful was a dose of pure, living medicine, teeming with billions of those good bacteria and the powerful enzymes they created. This wasn't a supplement you bought in a bottle. It was simply part of the daily meal. By eating this way, you were constantly refilling your body with life, with the very helpers needed for good digestion. These foods help strengthen your body's natural defenses, calm inflammation, and allow you to absorb more nutrients from everything else you ate. In a world without our modern processed foods that often leave us feeling tired and heavy, this was the source of real, steady energy. It was the original energy food, cultivated in a jar, not engineered in a lab. We've become so accustomed to food that is sterile and dead that we've forgotten what living food can do for us. Our ancestors didn't have the scientific terms, but they knew the results. They knew this food gave them vitality. This profound, life-giving benefit was the entire reason they practiced this craft. And the most incredible part? It didn't require a laboratory, just the most humble and essential of tools, the humble glass jar. So, how do we do it? How do we rebuild that living pantry for ourselves? It all starts here. You didn't need fancy plastic containers with their snap-on lids, or electric vacuum sealers that promise to lock out the air. The most important tool for this ancient craft was one we've all but forgotten, often relegated to the back of a cupboard, the humble, heavy glass jar. This simple vessel was the theater for the entire transformation, the quiet stage where the magic unfolded. Much like the old-fashioned cold frame, the glass jar was a perfect, simple piece of technology. It was pure. Glass didn't leach strange chemicals into the food, and it didn't hold on to the smells or stains of past experiments. It was honest. It allowed you to see everything happening inside, the tiny bubbles rising to the surface, the colors of the vegetables slowly changing, the brine growing cloudy with new life. Our modern obsession is with sterility, with boiling, bleaching, and scrubbing every surface until it's completely lifeless. But that was never the goal. The goal was simple cleanliness. A good, thorough washing was all that was needed. You didn't want to kill everything. You just needed to provide a clean, safe home for those invisible gardeners to begin their work. But the jar itself, as perfect as it was only half of the equation. The real secret started with the vegetables themselves, the living vegetable. The secret, however, started long before the jar. It began with the vegetables themselves. They couldn't be the waxy, perfect, pesticide-covered produce from a supermarket, trucked 1,000 miles and irradiated for shelf life. They had to be living. This was the crucial, non-negotiable step. To make living food, you had to start with life. That meant using vegetables straight from the garden or the local farmer, produce that was agroecological or organic. The reason was simple, yet profound. These vegetables still had their invisible gardeners, the good bacteria, clinging to their skins. This was the starter culture, nature's own inoculation. Modern, sterile produce, scrubbed clean and sprayed with chemicals, was dead on arrival. It wouldn't ferment. It would simply rot. It would become a jar of toxic slime. The difference between life and rot is where the vegetable comes from. This is the single step most people get wrong, and it's the most important. The preparation was just as gentle. You didn't scrub the vegetables with harsh disinfectants or antibacterial soaps. That would kill the magic before it even began. You simply washed them in a bowl of water with a small splash of vinegar or a pinch of baking soda. This wasn't about killing the bacteria. It was about gently cleaning the vegetables while protecting the very life you were cultivating. This was a fundamental shift in thinking. A few fresh zucchini, a sharp onion, some pungent garlic. This wasn't just a recipe, it was an ecosystem waiting to be born. But it wasn't just about life, it was also about flavor. The flavor weavers. This wasn't just about survival, it was about flavor. This was the art of the craft, the moment the master key became personal. Tucked carefully between the layers of crisp vegetables were the flavor weavers, the herbs and spices that transformed a simple preservation method into a closely guarded family secret. This was where the personality of the maker truly shone through. A signature written "Stans me in" spice. Hardy sprigs of rosemary, still fragrant from the garden, would be tucked in alongside the pungent garlic. A small spoonful of peppery whole mustard seeds might be scattered throughout, a promise of a gentle kick. Watch this. See how they scatter and settle between the vegetables? You're not just adding flavor, you are building a work of art. Earthy dried bay leaves would be snapped and layered in, their complex, savory scent mingling with the sharp onion. And perhaps, for good measure, a tiny dash of smoked paprika was added, not just for its deep, smoky taste, but for the beautiful, warm, reddish color it would lend to the brine. Every home, every family had its own signature blend, its own preference. Some liked the heat of peppercorns, others preferred the anise-like sweetness of fennel. This wasn't a rigid recipe, it was a canvas for creation, an edible signature passed down through the generations. This artistry was what made each jar unique, a time capsule of the garden's best. But this cloud of flavor, this beautiful combination of herbs and vegetables, needed one final, crucial element to come alive. It needed a saltwater bath. The saltwater bath. But the true heart of the master key was the brine. It was the simple saltwater bath, the magic liquid that protected the vegetables and coaxed them into new life. This brine wasn't just water, it was the perfect balanced environment, the food and the shield, all in one. It was precisely what those invisible gardeners needed to thrive, while simultaneously making the jar an impossible home for the microbes that cause rot. There was, however, a critical piece of wisdom that we have almost completely forgotten. Not just any salt would do. Today our tables are covered with processed iodized salt. It's uniform, bright white, and often filled with anti-caking agents to make it flow freely. But to our ancestors, this salt was dead. Those modern additives, the iodine and fluoride, are poison to the delicate life you're trying to cultivate. They won't allow the good bacteria to grow. They knew the salt had to be pure. They used unrefined sea salt, or rock salt, salt that was still connected to the earth. The only ingredient listed should be salt. And the ratio for this magic liquid was simple and timeless. For every 1 liter of pure, filtered water, they would dissolve 20 grams of pure salt. Pay attention. This is the most important part of the entire master key. It's not a guess, it is a precise ratio. For every 1 liter of pure filtered water, you must use 20 grams of pure salt. Write that down. That single ratio is the secret to safety and success. This simple solution was the cradle for the entire transformation. But this brine could only do its job if one final, simple, and unbreakable rule was followed. The submersion stone. There was one simple, unbreakable rule. No vegetable could ever touch the open air. The saltwater bath was the ultimate shield, but it could only protect what was beneath it. The air was the enemy, the place where mold and unwanted microbes lived, waiting to land and spoil the entire batch. Keeping everything submerged was the single most important part of the process, and for this, they had a clever, simple solution. Long before specialty gadgets and plastic inserts, they used what they had. Just like the old garden cloche, this tool was practical and effective. Sometimes it was a special, heavy glass weight crafted to fit the jar. More often, it was a submersion stone, a simple, smooth rock from the riverbed, scrubbed and boiled clean, then settled on top of the vegetables like a silent guardian. In a true moment of old-world genius, they might use a cabbage leaf press. A tough outer leaf from a cabbage would be folded and wedged into the neck of the jar, creating a living, edible barrier that held everything else down. This simple tool, whatever form it took, was the barrier between success and failure. With this final piece in place, the vegetables were safe, and the jar was ready to be set aside. And then, you waited. The patient wait, and then you waited. This wasn't fast food, it was slow medicine. The jar was sealed and placed in a cool, dark corner of the pantry or a cellar, away from the sunlight. And here, in the quiet dark, the real transformation began. This was perhaps the most difficult part for our modern world, an act of faith that required a virtue we have all but lost: patience. This wasn't a process of hours. For a simple, crisp ferment, you would wait at least 1 week. But our ancestors knew the real magic took time. The optimal transformation, where the flavors truly balanced and the health benefits became most potent, wouldn't happen for 2 or even 3 full weeks. Just like the old asparagus bed, this was a long-term investment. They understood, in a way we've forgotten, that flavor and health were not things to be rushed. They were things to be cultivated. For some ferments, like a truly powerful sauerkraut, the wait was even longer, months, not weeks. The longer it sat, the more acidic and complex the flavor became. They knew that time was the secret ingredient that deepened the taste and the medicine. But this quiet wait wasn't entirely passive. They were patient, but they were also watchful, because inside that sealed jar, something was coming to life, and soon it would need to breathe. The daily burp. You knew it was working when the jar started to breathe. A few days into the patient wait, tiny champagne-like bubbles would begin to rise to the surface, a visible sign of life stirring in the brine. This wasn't a warning or a sign of spoilage. It was the first joyful confirmation that the invisible gardeners were hard at work, that the jar was truly alive. As those billions of helpers feasted on the vegetable's sugars, they released more than just lactic acid. They also released carbon dioxide gas. This gas would build up, day by day, creating a gentle pressure inside the sealed glass jar. Our ancestors, who lived by this rhythm, knew this pressure needed a simple, daily moment of attention. This led to a brief ritual, a quiet interaction with their living food. Once a day, they would carefully twist the lid just enough to break the seal. There would be a satisfying psht sound. Listen, that is the sound of life. That is the sound of success. If you open your jar and you don't hear that sound, you know something is wrong. Then, the lid was tightened and the jar was left in peace. This wasn't a complicated technical procedure. It was a practical, hands-on step. It was how you prevented the pressure from building so high that it would overflow the brine. It was a simple 2-second check-in, a way of tending to the life inside. But there was another, even more ancient way they tested their creation, a tool far more powerful than any modern label: trusting your senses. How did they know when it was ready, or if it was truly safe? They didn't have printed expiration dates or government-mandated warning labels stamped on the glass. They had something far older, something our modern world has taught us to ignore: their senses. This was, perhaps, the most critical piece of lost wisdom. We've been trained to distrust our own judgment, to rely only on a date printed by a machine. They did the opposite. They trusted their noses. When they opened a finished jar, the first test was always the smell. A healthy living ferment has a distinct and powerful aroma. It should smell good. It smells sharp, tangy, and pleasantly acidic, like a strong natural vinegar or a fresh loaf of sourdough. It's a clean, bracing, and appetizing smell. A batch that had gone wrong was unmistakable. The smell wasn't just sour, it was putrid. It was an unpleasant, rotten odor that told you, in no uncertain terms, that something was deeply wrong. They trusted their eyes too. If they saw strange, colorful molds or anything that just didn't look right, the rule was simple, and it was absolute. There was no scooping the top off. It was best to discard the entire batch and start the process over. This wasn't seen as a failure, it was just part of the craft. And that is the final, most important secret. The master key isn't just a recipe for salt and water. It's the confidence to trust yourself, to trust your senses, not a plastic label. This is the skill we've truly lost. This simple sensory knowledge was the ultimate reliable test. But it wasn't just this practical wisdom we've forgotten. It was the entire culture that surrounded it, the lost culture of fermentation. Today we think of fermentation as a hobby. It's a niche trend you see online, a quirky science experiment in a mason jar. But not so long ago, it wasn't a hobby at all. It was a culture. It was a simple, powerful, and essential act of self-reliance, as common as baking bread or mending a fence. This knowledge wasn't a secret. It was a fundamental part of running a home, a way of taking responsibility for your own family's health. We've lost this mindset. We've been taught to fear bacteria, to trust only what comes sealed in plastic from a factory. We have, in effect, outsourced our health. We pay corporations for sterilized, dead food, and then pay other companies for probiotic pills to try and get that life back. Our ancestors would find this baffling. They knew that health wasn't something you bought. It was something you cultivated in your own kitchen, with your own hands. This wasn't just about a recipe. It was about a connection to nature, a partnership with the invisible world, and a form of practical wisdom that kept you strong. We've forgotten that we have this power. We've forgotten that our own homes can be a source of vibrant, living medicine. Reclaiming this one simple, ancient craft. It's about more than just making food. It's about reclaiming a piece of our own vitality, our own energy, and our connection to the living, breathing world. If you believe this lost wisdom is worth saving, like this video and subscribe for more. We are rediscovering these forgotten skills together.